Our next guest is calling for cartels to be designated as foreign terrorist organizations.
President Trump was right back in February to say that he was seriously considering designating these specific dangerous cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. I frankly am tired of bureaucrats at the State Department sitting around waiting while the president seems to get it.
Well, these murders were especially horrific, but the violence isn't new. And I think that if President Trump doesn't finally use this barbaric act to designate these cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, then the 3 mothers and the 6 children, including those 6-month-old infants, will have died in vain.
This designation of cartels as foreign terrorist organizations rests at the White House. This is a stroke of the pen initiative that the president could take based on essentially paperwork or recommendation from the Secretary of State, but it's his authority. And it would change the situation on the border dramatically.
The president back in March was actually considering it. Unfortunately, the Beltway politics and the bureaucrats in the Beltway that are protecting their own kingdoms, they don't want to do it.
But he's got people around him in the White House and the State Department who are refusing to actually do it. So my question to the State Department is why? From recognizing these dangerous cartels should be recognized as the terrorist organizations that they are. Yeah. What's holding the State Department back?
Since 2007, throughout the country of Mexico, they've lost over 200,000 citizens from the Mexican cartels.
The greatest point with respect to changing the circumstances, the conditions on our border, are to declare the Mexican cartels to be foreign terrorist organizations. No doubt. It takes us off of defense, puts us on offense.
Long overdue for this designation in Washington, but they're asleep. They're not getting it done, and people are dying.
9 Americans, 6 of them children, brutally murdered by the drug cartels. Their SUV gunned down, set on fire by members of the cartel.
This is a wake-up call for America.
So I think we need to act somewhat regardless of what the Mexican authorities are doing.
Mr. Chairman and members of the Criminal Justice Committee, I commend you for taking this step, a step that no other state has been willing to take. But unless we focus on the source and distribution, this epidemic will be with us forever.
I was one of the biggest advocates supporting the designation of these cartels as global terrorists because that's what they are.
The Americans slaughtered were part of a Mormon sect. The president tweeted this: "This is the time for Mexico, with the help of the United States, to wage war on the drug cartels and wipe them off the face of the earth."
This is something that should have been done on day 1 of the Trump administration. Designate these cartels as foreign terrorist organizations and eliminate them.
Their export of drugs and death, destroying American lives by the tens of thousands. President Lopez Obrador's unwillingness to declare war on those cartels is no less than a surrender to evil.
While you're trying to legislate, while you're trying to protect your people and your sons and daughters, the Mexican drug cartels are looking at Ohio like they look at Georgia, like they look at Virginia, as a potential marketing place to gain more and more addicts, infiltrate the school systems, make their money, and bring it back to Mexico and continue to perpetuate this horrific epidemic. And I call it a terrorist action.
Things are worse today than they ever have been. The tradecraft that we're seeing is like nothing ever before. It also has a direct effect upon every American in this country. We've got to designate them as foreign terrorist organizations and not just look at them with an investigative model, which is what we've always done, Lou. We've got to get all of the U.S. Homeland Security enterprise, the community, united behind this. And the way we do that is we designated them as terrorist organizations to go after their assets. So we're limiting their mobility. We're going after assets. We're focusing our government agencies, which is a big part of this.
80% of Mexico is now either controlled or disputed by the cartels.
Real world, when 3 American women and 6 American children were gunned down and burned alive, the only thing that can counteract bullets is more and bigger bullets.
I represent one of the thousands of moms who have lost a child to a heroin overdose. She was beautiful, smart, had a smile that lit up the room, and then she was gone. The Mexican drug cartels don't fly planes into buildings, but they aggressively ship poison into our communities. They control and destroy families.
We are putting a dent in the cartel's profits, and any time that you do that, they start to get more violent. They're not just operating in Mexico, they're operating here in the United States.
Historically, you always hear people talk about the Mexican drug cartels. We've got to take that out of it because it is something they do. It is not what they are anymore. Well, they are terrorists now. And Lou, they've migrated. You know, they were organized crime.
And these cartels are extremely dangerous.
He was found in the trunk of a car with no arms and no legs and no head. This has been going on a long time. This is the transition they have made. And the problem is that we have not transitioned our U.S. policies. We have been talking about the cartels, Lou, for 2 decades, and we have done nothing differently. And when we go after them as a foreign terrorism organization, we can go after their money globally much faster and completely degrade these capabilities of military-grade weapons that we're seeing.
If we were to designate them as terrorist organizations, we would actually be able to get the funding, we would be able to go after them much harder, and we would be able to force other countries like Mexico to act as partners with us. We cannot have any more deaths like what we just saw.
We literally have a fire going on in our backyard just across the Rio Grande River in Mexico. We have El Chapo's son getting released because of pressure of cartels on the Mexican authorities. We have 13 Mexican police getting gunned down and killed by Mexican authorities because they were daring to push back on the cartels. We had 26 people in a bar where the exits were shut down and they were lit on fire. We have bodies being put in sulfuric acid. We have beheadings. We have mass graves. We have 9 bodies hanging from a bridge, 7 being chopped up and found on the side of the road. These are the tactics of dangerous organizations that are targeting and terrorizing Mexican citizens and Americans. We need to treat these organizations, these cartels, as the terrorist organizations they are. Anybody providing material support to them, we could take them out. It would give our law enforcement personnel the tools to be able to target and take out these dangerous organizations who are terrorizing Americans and Mexicans alike. We know that they're making so much money, they're going to continue to put pressure on these authorities in Mexico. Make $100 million a week moving people.
Time to look at the cartels for what they are today and where they're evolving to. These are terrorist organizations.
They're killing people left and right, but the Mexican government folded. It's the blueprint now for all cartels in the future.
The Mexican government caved and released El Chapo's son.
This is fixable, but we've got to change U.S. policy to get there. And once we designate the cartels as terrorist organizations, we'll start going after them not only in Mexico, but working with host nations around the world.
They're monsters in many ways. We have to use the best and brightest resources of the United States government. We need to designate the cartels as terrorists and go after them with the true capabilities of the U.S. government.
And most of these cartels, the most famous ones we know of, have been designated as TCOs, transnational criminal organizations. But law enforcement and intelligence officials on our side of the border are limited in the tools that they can use to combat these cartels. In other words, it's about managing the cartels instead of eliminating them, which...
The cartels, everybody thinks about their drug trafficking, but their human smuggling is another huge portion of the business. Realize nothing crosses that border without the cartels getting a piece of the action. The White House just did this with the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. I argue that the drug cartels pose a much greater and more immediate threat to the United States than does the Iranian Revolutionary Guards.
If the Mexican government cannot protect American citizens in Mexico, then the United States may have to take matters into our own hands.